You're listening to Win-Win, an entrepreneurial community with your host, Ben Wolf.
Welcome to the Win-Win podcast. This is Ben Wolf, as always, your host. I am here with Kevin Hooiveld, one of the fractional integrators on my team right here at Wolf's Edge Integrators. Served as an integrator for many businesses before he came onto Wolf's Edge, many of them after and during while he's in Wolf's Edge. And we're going to be talking today about 10xing process in your business. So that is going to be the topic for today. Welcome, Kevin. It's a pleasure to be able to share your knowledge and wisdom that other people can take action on, business owners can take action on. Welcome today.
Yeah, thanks, Ben. Thanks for having me on. Really excited to dive into 10x process today.
Well, my pleasure. I'm glad you made the time. Glad we could do this. I know others are going to get a lot of value from it also. And so that people have some context for what we're talking about, if you don't mind, just share like a 2-minute background and context story of where you're coming from, how you got to be where you are now.
Sure. So I've spent my whole career in the operations seat. I'm an engineer by education, quickly realized engineering wasn't for me. Went back on my MBA, got into business, and have been in operations now for, that's all going on 30 years now. And fractional for the last 4. So really excited to share some of the learnings I've had over my career and some of the challenges, of course, along the way. I think, when you talk 10x thinking, people kind of think it's buzzwordy, right? Like, what is it? What is 10x? So really excited to jump in and kind of unpack that a bit today.
Yeah, well, I'm excited too. And part of it comes down to the fact that, maybe people who are listening to or watching this show have heard this concept before, that most of the businesses we come into, the biggest issues are with people, number one, and with process.
Yeah.
And so I think this is obviously a critical topic for us to talk about, and that people are going to want to listen to what COOs, successful people who have ran and scaled businesses before and currently have to say about this topic, so that they can get better at process themselves in this case. So I guess first of all, can you start us off with a story or example of 1 or 2 instances where you came into a business and like, what was the state of their process before? What did you do? What happened afterwards? What impact did it make in getting process to a much better place in a business?
Yeah, so I think from the second in command, that COO seat, the challenge is really it's how you approach growth, how you look at it on a much more holistic level. It's not writing an SOP. That doesn't solve all the world's problems. It's looking a little bit bigger than that. It's breaking through some of those limitations that maybe the visionary, the entrepreneur puts on himself, or the limitations that the team put on themselves. So the idea of 10x is greater than 2x, or 10x in general in terms of process, it's a fundamental shift. And I think, something that I really enjoy doing is coming in and looking at that bigger picture and really establishing an action plan around how to get from that dream to maybe a bigger reality that we don't really even think about today. It's not a matter of 10% revenue growth. It's way bigger than that. So share an example with you in my past. It was a manufacturing distribution company. And their value prop was to be a very high value producer of a specific good. And that process caused a lot of manufacturing waste, caused a lot of scrap materials. And their scrap rates were as high as 50%. And their COGS, of course, were very expensive because of that. And then when I came in and we looked at it a little more holistically, the parts of the product that they were still throwing out was still a viable product. It just didn't fit their unique value proposition. They didn't fit their niche target market. So we created a second brand. We created a brand new company with a second brand with a different niche. And that product was very successful. That company, the second company, ended up becoming twice as big as the first company. And they turned what was waste that they were paying to dispose of, was a negative line item on their P&L, to an incredible profit center for them. And they're well on their ways to 10x in the next couple of years.
And how did you approach, from a process point of view, taking what was happening before, transforming it, creating this new reality, creating this new brand, this new product launch? Like, tell me more about the story of how how you approached that process transformation that obviously goes from throwing away something to turning it into a new product. That's a process transformation. So how did that work?
Yeah, so it all started for us at one of their annuals, EOS annual session, and it's one of the benefits of working within the EOS community is having these sessions where you can be strategic and work on the business, not in the business for a few days. And we were looking at their 3-year picture and their 1-year plan, and they weren't getting where they needed to be. Their costs were out of control, and margins were way down. They couldn't see a path to increasing the revenue in their own target niche market. And it just led to some really creative brainstorming as a team and some really deep thinking. Who are we as a company? What do we want to be, and what do we stand for? And their value prop as their primary brand was really solid. They didn't want to deviate from that. So, from my seat, we start throwing out some crazy ideas. You start talking to the visionary directly about, how can we think bigger than what we are today? And that means sometimes breaking things that aren't broken. In this case, we had to break down, the essence of the company became 2 companies and served 2 different target markets with essentially the same product, but at 2 different quality levels. So really unique thinking that, of course, led them down to a tremendous result. It doesn't always go that way. Sometimes you have ideas that don't work, and that's okay too. But you have to be able to think a little bit bigger than what's right out in front of you.
Well, how did you manage that process though? Like, let's talk, I want to talk about the
Yeah,
process
right
topic,
down
dig
to
into the details a little more.
Yeah, so one new 1-year plan came in and new quarterly rocks put in place, where we really started to look at, from a sales marketing standpoint, who that new target customer would be, doing a little bit of market exploration based on price point and market scope and how much do we think we could sell. And they ended up selling way more than they even thought the market would bear. I mean, they're 5x of their initial first-year projections for that new company, which was great. Internally, it meant all kinds of changes to their manufacturing model, where instead of hucking this scrap product into junk bins and having the waste disposal guys come pick it up, now we had to put additional automation and process in place to capture these scrap units in a way that wasn't damaging them further, that we could bring them back into a new life and give them a new home into this new brand. And of course, on the finance side, now trying to find cost methods that will track this through. It's now not a cost item, now it's a revenue generating item. And that had its own set of unique challenges to make sure that we're flowing the cost models through both companies properly.
All right. That's awesome. I know you haven't, and the reason I'm asking this is because I know that I think that people can see themselves in their situations when it comes to process, or like they might spark ideas when they hear some of these specific stories. I know when we talked before we started recording about another example you have of being able to revamp process in a business, and like what happened, what was the story?
Yeah, so professional service firm, and no different than being a fractional integrator or an US implementer. You're trading days for dollars, right? You're billing out based on your own capacity to do work. And they had essentially same kind of planning exercise, right? They realized their revenue was dependent on the people they had on their team and the amount of hours that they could bill for. And for them to grow, they either need to bring on more bodies, which is not what they wanted to do, increase their rates, which the market would not bear, or fundamentally shift their mindset. And what they ended up doing was creating like an education training program. They monetized the knowledge that was in these people's heads, digitized it, put it online, and sold a product that can be viewed offline, that doesn't have to rely on those individuals' training hours in person anymore. And they've 5x the revenue over the last 5 years as well.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. And how did you, and these people who are used to working in a billable hour model, like how did you transition them from the process of that
Yeah.
to a process that was more scalable with this totally different model of delivery?
Yeah. So, we were able to pivot in such a way that this could be win-win for everybody. So the folks that were trading days for dollars before now became trainers at a higher level. They're master trainers, and their billable rates could actually increase now because they're selling a product beyond just a session day. We were able to also give them a cut of the revenue. They're getting a commission on the sale of these education and training programs now. So these folks, instead of having to run around the country and deliver training in person, could now do it over Zoom. They could do it at a lower cost, and they could actually make more themselves by doing that. So a win for the company, increase to revenue and profits. We were able to lower the total cost of delivery. Win for all the folks that were delivering that content, and win for the customers too, because they're able to consume that content at a lower total cost over the course of the year.
That's awesome. And I know a lot of people are wanting and wishing and realizing that they know they're not being efficient. They know they're not doing things as well as they could, or that there's not a uniformity of high quality when it comes to how their product or service is being delivered.
Yeah.
And they want to do better. They want to be better. But one of their challenges, sometimes I think, especially of sales teams, but also of other kinds of teams, that there's a big resistance to change,
Yeah.
or there's a feeling that, oh no, our whole benefit is how customized how customized we are. I talked to a manufacturing company that built houses, and it was one time that was in the process of trying to transform their model from projects to products, right?
Right.
Set products from projects. So each one was just one separate project, all custom, completely custom, to changing it to a product, with a modular model, so that they were able to, still have some variety, but do things in a much more efficient way.
Right.
And that's very hard, because sometimes there's a feeling that people have that, like, oh, our inefficiency is our value proposition.
Yeah.
And but whatever the rationalizations are, sometimes legitimate, sometimes illegitimate, how do you manage the human element of improving process, of change management, of improving process from a human perspective, overcoming objections and the like? Tell me what approach you've taken there. I mean, hopefully others can learn something from that,
Yeah.
in their own transformations.
Yeah. People are always the toughest part, right? The process piece is typically the easier thing to solve. Once you have an idea that has been vetted out and that actually has some legs, um, that's just work. The people part is tough, and the real, winning solution there is to find that win-win for everybody, right? The company can grow, it can blow through its glass ceiling that maybe you're stuck against, or it can increase its profitability that you're suffering to make. But you're creating a path now for the folks that were within the company to maybe take on a bigger role, or to be compensated differently, or maybe it's just to feel better as a company. You're not living in this state of chaos anymore. You're always scratching to find every dollar, or scratching to find every client. By changing that 10x mentality to have clients come to you, or to have to work maybe a little bit less hard. Maybe you're not working 80-hour weeks anymore. Maybe now you're only working 60, right? Culture piece is really an impactful piece. If you have folks that are on the team that can buy into that new shared vision, it's amazing what you can get done and how much you can enjoy getting there.
Some of what you're saying reminds me of, one phrase that people sometimes say, which is that, this improvement is not something you're doing to people, something you're doing for people.
That's right.
And that it's,
Yeah.
there's a lot of thought and intentionality necessary
Yeah.
in the change management process, which, like you said, is the harder part than just, knowing
Yeah.
what the right new process should be, in rolling that out and making sure that it's portrayed, that it's rolled out, that it's done intentionally in a way that has people feeling, hopefully, at least largely, I'm sure not, there's always going to be issues, but that overall it's being done to make things better for them and for everyone, and to further the
Yeah.
mission and goals of the business, not just, not just make us more corporate, right? Which is
Right.
which is evil, right? To be
Yeah.
more corporate.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, they can't always be wins either, right? That's the reality of some of these 10x ideas, is the people that have gotten you this far are maybe not the right people to take you to that next level, that 10x level. You may have some right people, right seat issues that need to change.
One other thing I wanted to get your thoughts on and pick your brain about is the idea of structure versus agility. Because
Yeah.
sometimes when we get better at process, it has the danger, or can at least be perceived as having the danger, and sometimes it legitimately does, of uh, of limiting creativity, limiting, maybe a feeling of authenticity on the receiving end of the product or service, that sometimes a lack of agility, that we could become too rigid, and
Yeah,
that we are going to be serving our clients or customers worse than we
yeah.
were before we implemented the process. So how have you approached process improvement in a business, while balancing the need for agility, flexibility, creativity?
Yeah.
How do those two things on that spectrum work if we want to, do it better and have the benefits of process without, with as few as possible of the detriments?
Yeah. So I think a lot of people get stuck in that cycle where I like to say it's progress over perfection, right? You're going to have ideas, you're going to have process that you want to put into place, and a lot of people get stuck in the idea that it's got to be perfect before you roll it out. And I kind of think the opposite. I think in order to be agile, you have to just progress. And you're throwing something out there, and you're modifying it, you're tweaking it, you're measuring it, and you're reacting to it continuously. Process is something that's never done. It's always something that's in works. It's in motion. And I think a lot of companies get stuck in that sort of spiral where they want to have the perfect SOP, or they want to have the perfect brand message, or they want to have the perfect ad copy, and they'll sit and stew over it, and they'll miss the opportunity. The opportunity will actually pass them by, and that wonderful 10x idea maybe had come and gone while they're trying to perfect that idea. So I really do believe it's a progress over perfection model that keeps you agile, keeps you really um, entrepreneurial thinking, right? You're always thinking 2 steps ahead to get to a 10x goal.
Awesome. Progress, not perfection. One of the things that I think that people listening to or watching this are going to want to hear more from you about, Kevin, is the um, is what tools, what systems. I don't know if it's project management tools or process documentation tools or learning tools, or just process management, ERP, CRMs. Like, what are some,
Uh,
like in your 30 years, what are some of the best
yeah.
systems and tools that you've found when it comes to process that are very helpful?
So that's a tough question. There's so many different industries that I work with and we work with.
Okay,
Everyone has
okay. So
strong
maybe it won't
preferred.
apply to everybody
Yeah,
or
yeah,
everything,
yeah,
but like of the ones you have exposure to.
yeah. I think we're in a really interesting time, in the scheme of technology right now, where there's so much AI centric tools coming out that can be really impactful. I know, even for myself, I wrote an AI note taker in all my meetings. That saved me personally probably 4 hours a week, not having to go through my handwritten notes of follow-ups and to-dos and action items, or what did they say, going back and asking questions or clarifying emails. Personally, for me, that's been a game changer in my own internal process and the way I deal with my clients. All the AI sort of video tools, there's Loom and Whale and all those are fantastic tools for getting process documented virtually or through video really quickly. You're not having to create these stuffy documents that live inside of a process binder. Now it's a living person telling you a story and showing you screen captures and documenting process in real time. Um, I'm really excited to see what the next couple of years hold for us. I think a lot of this AI is going to really start coming together and be way more impactful than we can even think. Um, I think what the really important thing is just to have ways and means to capture some of that data. Some people use 90.io more as a project management tool than a meeting runner, and that's okay. Some use video editing tools like Loom or Whale. Some use Monday.com or some of these other project management pieces of the software. I'm not going to say one's better than the other. I think you just need to do something. You can't live in a day anymore where everything is on a piece of paper or on a to-do list. You've got to find a way to collaborate and be more intuitive with your team. The world's just moving at a different pace these days.
One of the things that people talk about is the importance of, if you have processes that people are supposed to follow about a certain element of the business,
Mm,
that they should have measurables or metrics or KPIs that are associated with the proper fulfillment of those processes.
yeah.
Where do you think that fits in? Do you agree with that? And if so, what's the best way to figure out what the measurables are that should
Yeah.
be associated with those processes that in the way that they're executed?
So that's a great point. I'm a firm believer that everybody should have a number. Everybody should have some representation on their scorecard, whether that's through a 90.io or a different platform. That doesn't really matter. The fact is you have to measure something to know where you are now and where you're going to go, and are you moving in the right direction? That said, the biggest challenge I think for most companies have is they're not measuring the right numbers. They don't necessarily assign the right KPI or that right measurable to the individual, or the individual may not necessarily know or understand what's required of them in that measurable itself. So it's a number on a scorecard, but they don't know how to move that number in one direction or the other. And that's challenging, especially in companies that maybe have younger leadership or newer leaders. They've been promoted up through the ranks that don't have some context of the outside world and how that number really does impact not only their department, but other departments and the company as a whole. That can be really challenging to pick the right number, measure the right number, and monetize that right number.
So how do you pick the right number?
Yeah, so it's tough.
And maybe share a story. Like, what's an
Yeah.
example of a process in one of the businesses that you worked with, and what was the number or numbers that you came up with to associate proper fulfillment of that process?
Yeah. So I had a distribution company, and they bought and sold books. And we, when I first joined, we're spending about 30% of our cost of goods was labor. It was just picking and packing these books, going to a shelf, picking it off the shelf, putting it in a carton, shipping it to the customer. And they measured it on their P&L as a cost of goods, but they didn't actually measure what was in that number. Where was that labor being spent? Was it people walking to the shelf? Was it people putting it in a carton? Was it people putting a shipping label? They didn't have that data. And as soon as we started measuring that, we measured it in total seconds per transaction through the flow. We mapped out the flow and gave it seconds
Wow.
per transaction. They were able to get a really clear value map of where they were creating waste in the process, where they could streamline through automation. And at the end of the day, they ended up saving 80% on their labor. In their business, that's tens of millions of dollars of profit that we found just by measuring, just by putting the right number to the right spot.
Wow.
So it's not always easy. Even 30 years in this operation seat for me, it's not always easy for me to see what the right numbers are either. It takes a lot of really looking under the hood and scratching away, and sometimes asking some really dumb questions along the way to find out why we do things we do the way we do it. Why is this process the way it is? And you'd be surprised if you ask those 5 why questions that they say you need to ask. You get some really incredible answers and some really neat clarity on maybe what that right number is and what you can do about it to really make impactful change to that company, that 10x kind of change.
One of the famous comments by Elon Musk about process improvement is that the biggest mistake people make in process improvement is making a process more efficient that shouldn't exist to begin with.
Correct.
What's an example? You can take a minute to think if you want, but what's an example of a place where there was either before you got there or during your experience where there was an effort to streamline a process or make more efficient a process or a product or a part of a process that actually shouldn't have existed to begin with. And then when you just took away that part or took away that process or took away that product, that it actually, that's, I think his other phrase is the best part is no part.
Yes.
So, any examples you could think of where, as part of process improvement, you were able to see that there were parts that shouldn't just be made more efficient, but actually shouldn't exist?
Yeah. Yeah. So I worked with a client a number of years ago now, or fairly early on in my career, where we built out all the cellular towers for the big cellular companies. So we would actually install the tower and mount the antennas and the radios. And this is pretty specialized labor. This is guys that are climbing, several 100-foot towers that have very specialized skill sets, and they're very high-paid individuals. part of that process was to go back and audit these towers after they've been completed. You're basically doing preventative maintenance on them for the years following. And we would send one of these expensive radio technicians, they're making several $100s an hour, to climb the tower to look at a little blinking light. They would go and see if the light is still blinking. And they would bill us 2 or 3 hours to go to site, to climb the tower, to look at a blinking light, to go down. And when we started asking ourselves, well, why do we even need to go look at the blinking light? Why do we not have a strobe on the ground? Why do we not have a buzzer on the ground that we can, from ground level, see if this thing's working or not? And you start asking yourself the questions, well, why do we need to go to site to see this? This is a cellular tower. Why doesn't it send us a text message when the tower goes down? Why doesn't it send us a phone call or an alert back to head office when this happens? So we ended up coming up with a process that eliminated that tower climber from having to go out and do the preventative maintenance, and essentially saved.
Can't imagine what a huge difference that made.
Huge difference. You're talking millions of dollars of labor per year to go and climb these cell phone towers, and it's miserable work for these guys. They're climbing towers in the middle of winter to go check out the blinking light on the radio.
Blinking light.
Right? So you start asking yourself those questions: just why are we doing this? Well, we're doing it because, okay, but why are we doing that? And you come up to some really cool answers. And at the end of the day, more often than not, you find a new way, a new process that can be way more impactful. And again, it's a win-win. These tower climbers can now go and do work that they like to do rather than this PM work. They're happy. As a company, we were happy because we saved the labor. Our customer, the cellular providers, were happy because we weren't billing them for these PM calls anymore. It was a win-win-win.
Right.
Yeah.
Ask dumb questions.
Ask dumb questions.
It's the moral of the story.
No question is a dumb question, they say, but I like to ask the dumb ones anyways.
Right.
You get the best learnings from the dumb questions.
Yeah, that's awesome. And look, anybody wants to learn from somebody like Kevin, you can look up Kevin Hooiveld on our website, wolfsedgeintegrators.com. You can find out more about him, look him up on LinkedIn, be in touch with Kevin, be in touch with us. Obviously, if any more questions, Kevin is one of the executive integrators on our team. If you want to see what kind of integrator you need for your business, what type, if you do need a number 2 leader or an integrator, if that's something that might be helpful, or find out what kind of integrator you currently have. What kind of number 2 leader do you currently have? Or if the business owner, you are the integrator, you are the number 2 leader in addition to being the owner, how are you functioning? To what effectiveness are you functioning in that role? And so you could learn more about that. Take our MOA assessment to see what kind of integrator you have, what kind of integrator you need, if you want to actually achieve the goals that you say you want in the timeline you tell yourself that you want to achieve them. So check out wolfsedgeintegrators.com, and you can find a link to the MOA assessment there. You can learn about the team, including Kevin. And hopefully we can all get better at process, get better at people. And I appreciate you sharing your wisdom today, Kevin.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's a really fun conversation today.
Yeah, no, I seriously appreciate this. This is valuable, highly expensive information you're getting right here on the internet, on YouTube or Spotify or Apple Podcasts or whatever. Appreciate it. So Kevin, thank you for making the time, and everybody else, we'll see you on the other side. Thank you.
You're listening to Win-Win, an entrepreneurial community with your host, Ben Wolf.